Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We've allowed a couple of extra minutes because chapel normally meets in the day hall, and so we've been redirecting a few folks with traffic, but we want to welcome everyone here today on this beautiful day in Atlanta, Georgia. And as part of the welcoming, we are grateful to welcome the Baptist Joint Committee, otherwise known as BJC. And sometimes the name is a bit of a misnomer because we tend to focus on the Baptist part and wonder if we're not from the Baptist fold or family, what does that have to say to me? But precisely because it is Baptist in heritage, it values that notion of soul freedom, which essentially argues for religious freedom for all, regardless of one's belief or choosing to not believe. And the BJC has kept an active voice down through the decades in advocating on behalf of soul freedom. Religious freedom, as a place in their website, is the pillar of American life. It's written in the first 16 words of the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And there are a lot of notable projects that are going on currently with the BJC. In fact, I do encourage you to go to their website. You can get kind of an idea of current events and how they are active and a part of that. But I think probably the best decision the BJC has acted upon in recent history in the last several years is their involvement with Charles Watson, McAfee alum and Director of Education. He is the reason the BJC is, and we are so grateful and proud to be a part of Charles's life, and Charles is a part of ours. And I am serious, Charles. They did a good work when they brought you on board, and it's been a pleasure and a privilege to follow your career, your calling, as you live that out through the BJC. Without further ado, I'm going to welcome Charles Watson to welcome our guest speaker. Charles, pleasure.
Well, good morning to everyone, and it's so great to be back home at McAfee and seeing so many familiar faces that helped me along my journey. I can't believe it's been 9 years since I graduated here from McAfee. May will be 9 years. I can't take credit for all of BJC, nowhere close. BJC was around before me, BJC will be around after me. Glad to have my colleagues with me, Executive Director Amanda Tyler and my colleague Dan Hamill, who are also with me today as we bring the Shurden Lectures. For those of you that are not familiar, I think all of you may know Walter B. and K.W. Shurden endowed these lectures in 2004 to say, we want to go to a college and bring somebody there that can lecture the students and talk to the students and talk to the people of that school about the separation of church and state. And this year we have an amazing lecturer for you. Every 3 years we get to come back to Mercer University. And ever since I've been a part of BJC, that first stop is at McAfee. So let me tell you a little bit about our speaker today. I asked him last night, I said, Doc, what do you want me to say about you? He'll just say my name. Well, we know we can't do that. You have in your program there a bio of him. And also in your program, you have a space, if you didn't get a chance to register, you can scan the QR code there for students and non-students where you can stay in touch with BJC with all the work that we're doing that the Dean talked about, but also sign up to be a part of all of our programming in that way. But Doc said, just say something, my name, and go from there. Well, I can't do that. I have to tell you that he is a native of New Orleans. Did I say that close to right? Native of New Orleans and a graduate of Howard University. But the thing he wanted me to point out to you is that he is a Duke University graduate and a fan of the Duke Blue Devils.
There might be some Tar Heels in here.
Might be some Tar Heels, okay.
I'm going to start lunch now.
But I think if I remember correctly, somebody help me out. The last time Mercer played Duke, what happened? Mercer won. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was the case. But he's also a veteran of the United States Army. Thank you for your service with that. And also, we want to say he is the pastor, the senior pastor of St. Joseph AME Church in Durham, North Carolina, but he's also a professor at the law school at North Carolina Central Law School. I want to introduce you to our lecturer this year for the 2022 Shurden Lectures, Dr. J. Augustine.
My friends and my brothers and sisters, it is a pleasure to be with you this morning. I want to begin simply by saying thank you. I have to say thank you in the context of family. I am thankful to the BJC family, to Amanda, wonderful executive director, for her leadership and for the opportunity to be with you, to Charles for the gift of his friendship and his jokes, right? The gift of his friendship and his jokes. I'm so grateful. I'm also equally grateful to the family here at Mercer University. Over the course of 2 days, we'll be sharing in 3 lectures. I opted, because this is supposed to be a chapel service or in lieu of chapel service, and I am ordained clergy, I opted to preach. So we're going to go to the good book in just a moment. But on the note of foundations, I will say, I am grateful to my Duke family, those that are tuning in. I'm grateful to the family at NCCU Law School. I am especially grateful to my church family. In the African American community, just beneath the intimacy we have in church, oftentimes, is the intimacy we share in fraternities and sororities. I am blessed, if I can use that word with this crowd, I am blessed that 31 years ago, when I became a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated at Howard, my dean of pledgees lives here in Atlanta, fellow lawyer who a few years back accepted the calling to ordained ministry. And guess where he is in theology school? I want you to join me in welcoming Bill Green, a student here at McAfee, and my dear friend. I'm so thankful to you for being here too. Come with me now, my brothers and sisters, as we go before the Lord and ask for God's blessing on our time of sharing. Heads are bowed, eyes are closed. Precious God, I ask you now to speak and to share with your children a culture of inclusion, a culture, dear God, that embraces the proverbial other, and a culture that breaks down boundaries and barriers so we can all be drawn closer to you. This is my prayer. And let the church say, amen. I want to lift up for your listening ear 2 texts, one sacred and the other secular. The sacred text is arguably one of the most popular passages of Scripture in the New Testament. It is something we know as the parable of the Good Samaritan. Listen to these words in the New Revised Standard Version of the Holy Bible, found at Luke in the 10th chapter, the 25th through the 37th verses. Just then, a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he said, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" He said to him, "What is written in the law? What do you read there?" He answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And he said to him, "You have given the right answer. Do this and you will live." But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers, who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now, by chance, a priest was going down that road, and he saw him. He passed by on the other side. So, likewise, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care and had the innkeeper and said, "Take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend." Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? He said, the one who showed mercy. Jesus said to him, go and do likewise. Let me lift up now, just beneath that sacred text, I want to lift up a secular text. This is from the book, Taking America Back for God, Christian Nationalism in the United States, published in 2020 by authors Andrew Whitehead and Samuel Perry. They write, Christian nationalism is not unique because it is used to draw boundaries of the symbolic or physical variety around group membership. Many cultural frameworks or other social markers, religious or otherwise, are used by groups to draw boundaries between us and them. But Christian nationalism is distinct from religiosity in a general sense. The two phenomena share a common tendency to imbue boundaries of group membership with ultimate cosmic significance, to equate the in-group members with divine election and righteousness, and to see out-group members as hell-bound instruments of the devil himself. But commitment to Christian nationalism behaves differently from private commitment to religion, generally speaking, and particularly with regard to where boundaries are drawn. My brothers and my sisters, for just a few moments that is mine for this first of the Shurden Lectures, in lieu of a typical worship experience, I want to talk with you by really asking you a question. And who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? Now, as I shared, it's an absolute joy to be here in this beautiful city and on this wonderful campus. For me, at least, it's always special to come visit Atlanta. This is a beautiful city, and there's so many things about it I love, but I must confess there's one thing I just can't stand, and that is the Atlanta Falcons football team. I can't stand the Falcons because, as Charles referenced, I'm from New Orleans, and I'm a card-carrying member of the Who Dat Nation. Even though I live now in Durham, North Carolina, I will always be a New Orleans Saints fan. Now, as a proud card-carrying member of the Who Dat Nation, I recognize that my special affection for New Orleans has a little something to do with Saints football, but it has a whole lot to do with food and with New Orleans' wonderful neighborhoods. Now, as far as the city's neighborhoods go, you can call the roll. I'm sure you've heard of Algiers. I'm sure you've seen the Irish Channel, maybe the Garden District or Treme. And everybody has heard of the world-famous French Quarter. As someone who came of age in the 1970s, only a few years after the Civil Rights Movement, and in thinking about that concept of boundaries that the authors lift up, I grew up in what can only be described as a black neighborhood. When I entered middle school, because of integration and because of the practical impact of Brown v. Board of Education, I had an opportunity to spend time in other neighborhoods too. I spent time in white neighborhoods just like I spent time in Hispanic neighborhoods. I spent time in some upper class neighborhoods, and I spent time in some poor neighborhoods just the same. I began to realize that I had a whole lot in common with people who at face value were not like me. And I came to redefine my concept of what it is to be a neighbor. Now, regardless of whether the neighborhoods I visited had lots of creature comforts or they were dealing with basic and more modest amenities, once I moved past the social construct of race and past stereotypes that promote xenophobia in the United States of America, I realized that neighbor has a lot more to do with shared values and a lot less to do with geography. Although I do acknowledge that proximity, in some cases, has something to do with the equation. But wait a minute. In terms of speaking about proximity, Mexico is just to our south. And over the course of the last few years, we've been anything but neighborly to Mexico. While buying into the racist and Christian nationalist propaganda of "Make America Great Again," We elected a president who campaigned on lines of division, calling people who I thought were our neighbors rapists, drug dealers, and murderers. As part of his presidential administration, in the name of something called immigration reform, we issued travel bans against our Muslim brothers and sisters as we started separating children from their family at the U.S.-Mexico border, and we played into the divisive rhetoric of building a wall, an example of the physical boundaries Whitehead and Perry lift up to separate us from those who otherwise would be our neighbors. Let me be clear. What I'm asking you to do on this March morning is to be introspective and to think. I'm asking you to think about the fact that as we assemble here for these Shurden Lectures, we are just 1 month removed from what was supposed to be a month-long celebration of Black history. Instead, we're 1 month removed from a time of self-preservation and self-defense in responding to a wedge issue called critical race theory, with threats of state legislatures and local school boards trying to ban certain books and trying to unwrite Black history. I want you to think about the fact that on this morning, March the 29th, 2022, we are only days away from the April 4th anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination. Dr. King gave his life to the work of reconciliation and believing in a dream of equality for all people while working for the lofty ideal of democracy. Now, however, 54 years after his untimely death, democracy is nothing more than an ideal because in the wake of the 2020 presidential election, numerous state legislatures, most reprehensibly here in Dr. King's home state of Georgia, are doing everything they can to thwart democracy and ensure that as many people who voted in 2020 will never have that opportunity to vote again. So, in attempts to be disquieting and draw boundary lines here in America that define us versus them, I'm asking you to think and embrace the proverbial other and pose the question, who is my neighbor? When we look at the text, now, in lieu of a traditional lecture, we're preaching here from one of the most popular passages of Scripture in the Holy Bible. It's a parabolic discourse that's often called the parable of the Good Samaritan. There's so much we can learn from this text through the lens of racial reconciliation while looking at the context of inter-race relations while we lift up a discussion of the phenomenon known as Christian nationalism. At first blush, there's a conflict in this text, a conflict in this parable as it begins with Jesus having to deal with a smart-mouth lawyer. Jesus knew exactly the type of lawyer he was dealing with when the lawyer asked Jesus a trick question about trying to inherit eternal life. Now, this lawyer, let's be clear, was no Johnny Cochran. He was not someone who was well skilled in criminal law or in civil procedure. This lawyer wasn't like Attorney General Merrick Garland. He wasn't someone schooled in constitutional law. Instead, this lawyer was well schooled in the Mosaic Law. He was well schooled in the Jewish Torah, meaning Jesus wasn't dealing with a litigator. Jesus wasn't dealing with a transactional lawyer. Jesus was dealing with a Pharisee, someone who knew Jewish scriptures. That's why this lawyer answered Jesus by referring to what we know as Deuteronomy 6:5 and Leviticus 19:18. What I'm suggesting to you is that this so-called lawyer was more like what we would call a theologian when he challenged Jesus' authority on interpreting Jewish scriptures. Now, as we move past conflict as a foundation in this text, the parable moves to complication by the way Jesus responds to the lawyer's question, and who is my neighbor? Jesus could have very well answered the lawyer directly. He chose not to. Jesus chose to flip the script and upset this lawyer's apple cart by asking the same question he posed to Jesus. In doing so, Jesus introduces us to three characters who come across an unnamed and unidentified man who's been left for dead on the side of a road. More importantly, by framing the story as he does, Jesus gives us all a lesson on race relations long before the Black Lives Matter movement, when we were introduced to Ahmaud Arbery, to Breonna Taylor, and to George Floyd. And most importantly, Jesus teaches us how to not draw boundaries of us versus them and how to embrace the proverbial other. Now, this brother, beaten and left for dead, doesn't have a name. He doesn't even have a background. We don't know anything about this brother's education, and the text does not identify him by ethnicity or by race. That means we can't say with certainty that this brother was Michael Brown, a young black man killed by police officers and left in Ferguson, Missouri. We can't say with certainty that this was Eric Gardner, another black man choked by police officers in Staten Island, New York. And we can't say that this was Alton Sterling, still another black man killed by police officers and left on the side of the road in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. But we can logically conclude, as Jesus was a Jew, as Jesus was surrounded by his Jewish disciples and answering a question from a Jewish lawyer, we can conclude this unnamed brother was Jewish too. So, in answering this Jewish lawyer's question from the perspective of a fellow Jew who's in a most precarious position, Jesus shows us all that a real neighbor has a lot less to do with where you live and more to do with your willingness to embrace. Jesus shows us that a real neighbor is someone who will not marginalize you, because a neighbor will be deliberate in trying to identify with you. Meaning your neighbor might be next door, your neighbor might be up the street. Your neighbor might be in another city, or your neighbor might just be in another state. Your neighbor might be black, or your neighbor might be white. Your neighbor might be male, your neighbor might be female. Your neighbor might be cisgender, your neighbor might be transgender. But whenever you find commonality with someone and are deliberate with connecting with the other, that person is your neighbor. Now, as Jesus begins answering this lawyer's question, the first passerby he introduces us to is the priest. You would assume the priest would be the unnamed Jewish brother's neighbor, because you'd assume that a priest would always want to do good for others. Not this priest. This priest must have been concerned about doing good for himself, because he was obviously in a rush to get somewhere. Maybe this priest was invited to preach at the McAfee School of Theology, and he was in a rush to get to chapel. Maybe he was late for prayer meeting. Maybe he was trying to get to the temple, or maybe he had to teach Bible study. Something was pushing this priest, because as he saw a fellow Jew, this priest went to the other side of the road. I guess Jesus is telling us that just because we have something in common with someone, it doesn't necessarily make them our neighbor. Jesus continues, and in answering the lawyer's question, the second passerby he introduces us to is a Levite. Surely the Levite would be this brother's neighbor. Levites are descendants of the tribe of Levi. They are holy people who are set apart by God to do God's work in God's temple, including the playing of music. Surely then, this one who's been set apart by God would stop and be a neighbor. Oops, we must have caught him late to get somewhere too. The Levite must have been going to the same place as the priest. Maybe the priest was going to preach and the Levite was going to play the music at worship service here at McAfee. They must have both been in a hurry to get somewhere, because they both were likely candidates, but neither of them proved to be a neighbor. So the lawyer is still asking, who is my neighbor? Finally, in verse 33, Jesus says, but a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. Jesus then goes on to tell how the Samaritan cleaned up the injured Jew, bandaged his wounds, and even made sure the Jew got the care he needed and was on his way to recovery. This, what the text describes as pity, is what the lawyer recognizes as mercy. So in thinking about the differences and lines of division we see here in the United States of America. Divisions between white evangelical Christians and more progressive social justice-oriented Christians. Social divisions between blacks and whites, and philosophical divisions with Christian nationalists who are not only trying to destroy the democracy, but also unwrite black history and negate the existence of the Jewish Holocaust. This part of Jesus' parable had to get everyone's attention because of the well-known divisions and enmity between Samaritans and Jews. Samaritans were considered to be unclean by Jews, and Jews were the sworn enemies of Samaritans. Samaritans were of mixed ethnic heritage and were looked at as quote-unquote different in their culture. In other words, they weren't Jew, but they most certainly weren't Gentile. And because of the long-standing tension between them, there's no way you would think that a Jew and a Samaritan could be neighbors. But this brother, this good Samaritan, must have rejected differences to find a culture of commonality. He must have rejected those boundaries of Christian nationalism as defined by us versus them that grow out of a civil religion that has little to do with faith but has everything to do with power. This Good Samaritan must have believed in racial reconciliation as he rejected the impulse of unconscious bias. He must have been a forward-thinking Samaritan who was not so concerned about things that divide us. This Samaritan was more concerned about things that unite us. He wasn't so concerned about the black race or the white race, the Hispanic race or the Asian race. This Good Samaritan recognized that as co-members of the human race, we all ought to try to be one another's neighbor. As we see more and more lines of division in America, divisions that undermine religious liberty and voting rights, and divisions that attempt to unwrite black and Jewish portions of American history, we can all learn a little something from this text because we all should be more deliberate in trying to be someone else's neighbor. Neighbor cannot be limited by geography or proximity because in these United States of America, the concept of neighbor has everything to do with erasing boundary lines that go to the heart of group polarity and the divisiveness of Christian nationalism. That means the question I'm really asking as part of these 2022 Shurden Lectures and in the context of America's many divisions is, will you be my neighbor? Meaning, will you reject the narrative of Christian nationalism that we saw on display on January 6, 2021, where we conflated cross and country with a perverse version of Christianity that attempted to thwart democracy and overturn the free will of the American people? As we approach now this anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, with the Voting Rights Act having been gutted in 2013 by Shelby County v. Holder, will you embrace policies of democracy? Will you allow people to vote, even here in the state of Georgia, if we remain true to what we said in that famous declaration that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal? What I'm really trying to ask is that if we can just stop drawing boundaries, can we all be neighbors? I want to close now by going back to where I began. I shared with you that in my love for New Orleans, I love the neighborhoods, but I also love the food. And my favorite food on the planet is gumbo. It's important here in 2022, my brothers and sisters, that we all learn how to make our own version of gumbo, because America can never go back to the proverbial melting pot of yesteryear. The melting pot analogy speaks to assimilation. It speaks to giving up your authenticity and trying to fit in so you can belong. By making gumbo, however, in making gumbo, we honor individuality while simultaneously coming together to create community. Shrimp can be shrimp. Sausage can be sausage. Chicken can be chicken, and okra can be okra. You don't have to be something you're not when you come together in gumbo. You can be your full and authentic self. That's what I like most about New Orleans. And I like how Jesus has redefined the concept of neighborhood in this celebrated text. I'm therefore asking you this morning to look introspectively and ask yourself the question, who is my neighbor? Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thank you for that, Augustine. If you didn't know, he is a preacher. I mentioned him being a lawyer, but he is a preacher. And I'll be remiss if I didn't tell you guys that Dr. Augustine has a book out called Call to Reconciliation, How the Church Can Model Justice, Diversity, and Inclusion. So please look at your program there. You can find that at his website. We want to take some time here to give you an opportunity to ask some questions of whether it's Dr. Augustine and his sermon today, our religious freedom and our fight that we do at the BJC. But this time, Dr. Augustine has said welcome to any questions that we have. So if anybody stand up and have questions for us. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to take a moment, personal privilege, please. I mentioned my Dean of Pledges, Bill, being here and the love I have for my fraternity. I also want to recognize someone else who is a preacher's preacher, Brother Reverend Dr. Otis Moss, who is here. It's a pleasure to see you, Dr. Moss. God bless you, my brother. God bless you. A preacher's preacher. I thank you all so much for receiving me. I'm open to any questions you have, perhaps regarding my interpretation of the text, my interdisciplinary lens as a lawyer, as a theologian, how I'm looking at social affairs and how I try to preach a liberating social gospel to my congregation, or anything before we eat lunch. We're not having gumbo. I know we're not having gumbo, but anything before we eat lunch.
Can you unpack your interdisciplinary lens just a little bit more so that those of us who are preachers and biblical scholars and students who are in the room can begin to understand how to put all these lenses together as they read Bible and don't just go out and continue to read Bible for white nationalism?
Yeah. So I am, I proudly consider myself to be bivocational, and that the good Lord called me twice. The first calling as a lawyer, I'm a very proud graduate of Tulane University Law School in New Orleans. I had a good career litigating cases, fighting for civil rights and social justice in the courtrooms of the state of Louisiana. Just like I made reference twice deliberately to Georgia and what I see injustices going on here with respect to the Georgia legislature attempting to engage in voter suppression. Georgia is part of the Southern culture. Louisiana, you can't get any deeper in the South because you'd be swimming if you go any deeper, right? You'd be down in the water. So there's a whole lot that I saw in terms of my personal experiences as a lawyer, having grown up in that state. There's a whole lot that I saw. The second calling, when the good Lord called me to ministry, that meant theological education at both United Theological Seminary and Duke Divinity School. And you can't separate what you know from what you're learning. So I am blessed now to be consulting faculty at Duke Divinity School while simultaneously teaching at NCCU Law School. I read a lot. As you referenced, a book came out last month, February the 8th. As I'm sure many of you know, you write a book. My goodness gracious, how many books did you read to write that book, right? It's so much. So my mind is consistently looking at the polarity of America and tracing pendulum swings that are very predictable in many regards, where progress is seen in the African-American community, and there is what Van Jones, I think, coined CNN the night of the 2016 election. Then there's a white lash. I preached for someone Sunday, and I referenced 2020 being a year that was much like 1877, when the troops were withdrawn from the South and all HELL broke loose across the South, right? So I think it's very important to realize that nothing happens in isolation. And the interdisciplinary lens in which I try to approach whatever I'm reading, whatever I'm preaching, whatever I'm looking at, helps me to understand that as much as there was Martin Luther King Jr. as a celebrated figure in the civil rights movement, there was also Thurgood Marshall. There was also a side in the courtrooms that fought for justice. And bringing those two perspectives together has helped me tremendously. It is one of the reasons I was drawn to social justice ministry. And it's one of the reasons the hermeneutic lens in which I interpret scriptures, or how I look at scriptures, is always from the perspective of social justice. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Y'all ready for the food? That's what it is. You ready for the food? Huh? Yes, Dr. Moss. Yes, sir.
Two-part question. First, I just really appreciate your presentation so very much.
Thank you.
Could you share with us, from your perspective as a minister and as a lawyer, in light of the confirmation hearings of Judge Patrick Brown Jackson, where do you see the residue of Christian nationalism in the confirmation hearings?
Yeah.
The second question is, you mentioned gumbo. What is the root for the gumbo in America?
So first, with regard to the confirmation hearings, there was Christian nationalism is, I think, a thwarted version or a perverse version of Christianity. It's not at all rooted in scriptural doctrine. It's about power that emanates from a manifest destiny, sort of, us versus them. We are God's chosen people here, the United States of America, and anybody who's different than the original settlers, the devil with you, right? So Lindsey Graham came out outright and asked about church. I asked about her religious views, and I said, my goodness gracious, did he just say that? I don't know what that's about. I don't know where that comes from. But it is again less to do with orthodoxy, and it's more to do with drawing lines of power to say us versus them. So I can only assume, and when you think from a First Amendment perspective, religious freedom is not just the ability to practice religion, but when you respect, or when Congress makes no laws respecting religion, we don't act in a way in the United States that shows a prejudice for or against religion or the free exercise thereof. His question in and of itself, I think, was rooted in Christian nationalism and was wholly out of place. Because it is about drawing lines of power of us versus them, I saw, for example, the senator, her name escapes me, but the senator from Tennessee, asking questions and going down a laundry list, not really wanting an answer, but really just wanting to talk. And I said, these are sound bites for campaign, but these are sound bites for fundraising that she's doing, right? And we're talking about a critical race theory. And I said to myself, okay, self, wait a minute. This is something that I graduated from law school in 2001. This is something I studied in law school that was, people were still trying to understand it back then. When we started talking about it in popular culture here just recently, I said, what the devil does that have to do with the price of tea in China? It has absolutely nothing to do with it. But when you are trying to draw these lines of us versus them, I saw those questions rather as attempts to cast dispersions, as attempt to paint her in a light that is anything but acceptable according to the original Anglo-Saxon narrative of who's acceptable in America. And it's very unfortunate. It's very, very unfortunate. I think I have some good friends who went to Harvard Law School with her. And I understand she is the real deal. I mean, she is the same wonderful, patient, good-tempered, mild-mannered, all that we saw in the hearings is who she really is. And I understand that from people who studied with her and who went to school with her and who know her. So the residue, I think, is in the power struggle. The residue is here in Georgia, not just in the confirmation hearings. The residue is in Georgia with an attempt to thwart democracy with voter suppression laws. It's going on in North Carolina. We were successful with a litigation there where the General Assembly attempted once again to gerrymander voting districts, congressional and state legislative districts. It's an attempt to control power and to make sure that others who don't fit into the original narrative, I think you said white Christian nationalism, some mention ethnicity or race along with it too, but it's an attempt to make sure that power is not shared, but power is preserved. And you asked about the root for the gumbo, which I'm really low. But anyway, the roux is what brings us all together. The roux is the consistency, I think, that keeps us together. I'll say that. I wish I could make a pot of gumbo for you here. I really do. I love making gumbo. That's my favorite thing to do is to cook gumbo. It's so therapeutic. But when you think about the analogy of gumbo as the pot for us all, not the melting pot of yesteryear, but a place where we all come together in commonality. When we find commonality, when we find a place of belonging, when we are deliberate about removing barriers, there's our roux. There's the space where we can come together and welcome one another regardless of gender, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of race, regardless of what. That's the rule that should be the United States of America. Regrettably, we have proven time and time again that we have anything but good rule. Any other comments or questions? Charles, I think they're ready for the food.
Doc, if you will, one quick thing. Many people that are here won't be able to make it to Macon. If you could just give just a slight little preview of the 2 lectures that you will be giving tomorrow down in Macon, and then we'll conclude from there.
Thank you so much. I took the opportunity here to be quote unquote different in the preach and to show an exegetical look at how I view Scripture through the lens of social justice and to address Christian nationalism, which I see as the greatest threat to democracy in this day and age as we draw boundary lines. Tomorrow, however, will be much more traditional with PowerPoint slides and with a typical lecture. In speaking at the College of Arts and Sciences, College of Arts and Sciences, College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, we will focus on history. So we're going to look at the history of Christian nationalism, some things from years past, from 19th century, but really focusing on 20th century when Eisenhower came to power, the National Day of Prayer, the printing in God We Trust on the money, many things that started to infuse cross and country with a select, again, us versus them, right? And how Dr. King rose up as part of the liberal wing of Christianity at that time, speaking truth to power as a prophet in the Monas Triplex doctrine, prophet, priest, king, how he went as a prophet, preaching a gospel of liberation and willing to engage in civil reconciliation to make sure all does mean all when we talk about holding these truths to be self-evident that all people are created equal. So we'll look at sort of a recent history, if you will, of Christian nationalism that gave us what I think is the most abhorrent example of it recently, the January 6th insurrection, when you see people with T-shirts and flags that say, Jesus is my savior, Trump is my president. How did we get to that point? How did we put all that together, right? You entitled each of them, but how you put that together, right? So I think that the first lecture will sort of focus on that. The other lecture at the School of Law, which I'm very excited about, I'm going to look at the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the impact on that act as the 2013 decision Shelby County v. Holder had, and how it gutted certain provisions of the act while still leaving it on the table. It's now watchdog legislation that has no bite. It's bark but no bite at all. And how southern jurisdictions in North Carolina, here in Georgia, how they're doing so many things to thwart full citizen participation, and particularly in the wake of Stop the Steal, in the wake of all of that foolishness, in the wake of you all that vote here in Georgia, of your election commissioner, the Secretary of State, Brad, and I can't pronounce his last name, forgive me. How's it pronounced? Rathesberger. Okay, you know who I'm talking about. Brad, yes, but Secretary Brad R., yes. How he has been forthright in saying, I supported the incumbent. I supported him. I'm tending this, I'm the one minding the elections, and I can assure you there's been no improprieties. There's been nothing like that, right? But how state legislatures are buying in, largely influenced by Christian nationalism of defining this us versus them, and voter suppression legislation is alive and oh too well. So the talk at the School of Law will focus a little bit on democracy, the concept of democracy and where we are with that now. I want to say thank you all again so much for having me. It really is a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, and God bless and God keep you.
Thank you again, Doc, and I just want to end by letting you know you don't have to miss tomorrow's lectures. They will be live streamed, so just look at on the Mercer University YouTube page. We have a live stream, and also if you visit our website, bjconline.org, the Shurden Lectures, you can find the live stream from there. So you don't have to miss out on the continual preaching, even though it's a lecture that's going to go on tomorrow. Thank you for coming and joining with us, and we'll be around to shake hands and say hello to those that we haven't said hello to. Thank you again.